The Bruce Lee curse is a term used to describe the series of unfortunate events and deaths that have occurred among some of the men born into the Lee family. The curse gained notoriety after the deaths of Lee and his son Brandon Lee and remains prevalent to this day. Firstly, Bruce Lee died in 1973 at the age of 32 under mysterious circumstances which led to speculation and conspiracy theories. In 1993, his son Brandon Lee, who was also an actor, died on the set of the movie The Crow, aged 28 years old. To understand the curse, you have to go back to Bruce Lee's early childhood. Despite having two brothers, his parents were mostly concerned about demons wanting the soul of their son Bruce. Such was their paranoia, they even nicknamed him Little Phoenix, which was a woman's name at the time. This was supposedly to ward off any bad spirits. Remember, as Bruce Lee was born in 1940, these paranormal beliefs were prevalent at the time, and demons have long been a part of Chinese mythology. Nevertheless, if the name Little Phoenix was meant to help Bruce Lee escape demons, it seems it didn't work. In 1970, Bruce Lee almost broke his back and suffered sacral nerve damage. This happened during one of his rigorous exercise routines whilst performing a move called Good Mornings. In short, this technique is a variation of the squat which can blow out your lower back if performed poorly. Some argue that this is what led to his eventual dependence on opioids, which would make sense considering that back injuries can be incredibly painful. Luckily for Bruce at the time, he survived and would live for at least a few more years. A couple of years later, Bruce Lee was bitten by a snake whilst on the set of Fist of Fury. In an interview with his wife, Linda Lee Cadwell, she once said, "This snake actually got quite nasty with Bruce and did in fact bite him. The venom had been removed from this cobra, thank heavens, or the film may have never been finished." Just 1 year later, in 1973, Bruce Lee would die. Here, he died to cerebral edema, which was caused by an aspirin due to a bad headache. In brief, this term is used to describe swelling on the brain. Like many parts of Bruce Lee's life, there is often speculation about his death. Some have claimed that the swelling happened due to Bruce Lee being on various hard drugs at the time, such as cocaine. However, this has never been confirmed. Looking at this incident alone, you'd think that Bruce Lee's death was unusual, but not too bizarre. Nonetheless, when you look at the death of his son Brandon, you may begin to think differently. In Bruce Lee's final movie, The Game of Death, it was written that Lee's character would die by a prop gun whilst on the set of a film. This gun would usually be empty, but a nemesis of his character would load it with the intention of killing him. As they say, life often imitates art, and sadly for Brandon Lee, this plot would foreshadow his future death. Undoubtedly, Brandon was making his own career as a Hollywood megastar and was the lead role in the 1994 movie The Crow. It was on set where Brandon was tragically shot dead. You guessed it, the firearm that killed him was a loaded prop gun. To make things even weirder, Bruce Lee's last film was called The Game of Death, which obviously has themes of morbidity. Not only this, but The Crow was also incredibly morbid as well. Here, Brandon Lee played the role of Eric Draven, who was a kind of demon seeking vengeance for his murdered girlfriend. Understandably, you can see why the Bruce Lee curse has remained a talking point even decades later. Moving away from superstition, it should be noted that Bruce Lee was also the middle child of his two brothers. His younger brother Robert is still alive and in his 70s, whilst Bruce Lee's older brother Peter died in 2008, aged 68 years old. Supposedly, this curse often states that it is the firstborn son of the family which will die and is in danger from demons. However, As Peter was older than Bruce and lived until 68, this somewhat debunks the myth. Furthermore, it could be argued that the whole curse idea came from a 1993 documentary called The Curse of the Dragon, which planted the idea into the audience at the time. If this had a different title, then maybe people would think differently about Bruce Lee. In the same year, there was also a movie release of Dragon, which was a fictional biopic based on Bruce Lee's life. In one scene, he literally fights a demon who cursed him. In other words, the curse was talked about before the death of Brandon Lee. As you can imagine though, when Brandon died, it only made the theory more prominent. Regardless of reason and logic, there are still a lot of spooky coincidences when looking at Bruce Lee's death alongside that of his son Brandon. With that said, sometimes science can only explain so much, and it's understandable why people attribute their deaths to a curse. Irrespective of this, I'm sure we can all agree that their deaths were equally tragic, and the martial arts world would look vastly different had they both lived longer. On a final note, let us know what you think about the Bruce Lee curse in the comments. Is it real, or is it just a series of unfortunate events?